Klaus Larres is a professor of history and international affairs at the University of North Carolina at Chapel Hill. He is an expert on contemporary EU economic and security policies. Professor, first I want to get your opinion of the summit that just took place in Brussels, the takeaways including China's pledge to open more to Europe.
Yeah, on the whole, it was a very successful summit. These were difficult negotiations. It took quite some time, but there had been rumors that there might not even be a statement at the end, and that was not true. A successful statement was jointly concluded, and that is always good. And many promises were made. Really, we have to see whether these promises will be fulfilled. What above all was agreed was that by next year, by 2020, a bilateral investment treaty between the EU and China will eventually be concluded. These negotiations have been going on since 2013, so quite some time, and it's about time that that treaty would be concluded. Hopefully that will actually happen. Then it was agreed that the World Trade Organization rules will be reformed, that China and the EU will contribute and work together to achieve, which, if it comes true, will be also a huge success and is very much needed. It was also agreed that the enforced transfer of technology will be talked about and perhaps some progress will be made. And as you know, that is an EU demand that something has to be done about the enforced transfer of technology. And then the Chinese Prime Minister also promised that there would be a new negative list published by June, which would show that the list of sectors which are really restricted for foreign companies would be significantly reduced. And hopefully that will indeed happen by June of this year.
So a lot of takeaways there, but how would you describe the current state of relations between China and the EU? The foreign minister was there just a few weeks ago, paying some visits, and President Xi Jinping also paid a visit to Europe last month. So given all that has happened in recent weeks, where do things stand?
Yeah, I think, EU-China relations have to be seen in the context of the trilateral relationship with also the United States. And China is, of course, involved in a pretty tough trade war with the United States. So China is looking for friends elsewhere, and these friends it hopes to find in Europe. But Europe, of course, is also having severe difficulties trade-wise with the United States, and the trade relationship with China is, of course, very important for almost all European countries. So also the EU is highly interested in good relations with China. And I think the summit in Brussels was meant to intensify the relationship without, however, giving in, because the EU has become tougher regarding trade with China. And only recently it has published a new strategic paper which says that it views China now as an economic competitor and as a systemic rival. And these are tough words. And these words probably would not have been heard a year or 2 years ago. So I think the EU wants to have very friendly relations with Beijing, but it also wants to insist on its own point of view, at least in some areas, and the enforced transfer of technology is part of that, but also the conclusion of an investment treaty, and the big word really is reciprocity in market access.
Do you think Italy's recent signing onto China's Belt and Road Initiative influenced at all this week's discussions?
Yes, definitely. The EU is deeply worried about China dividing the EU countries. The EU wishes to act as a united actor. It is not yet a properly integrated state, but it wants to get there. It certainly wants to talk with one voice in trade relations, in economic affairs. And Italy joining as the first G7 country, joining the Belt and Road project, that is something which disconcerts the EU and is also very concerning for the big EU countries like Germany and France. French President Macron has actually said that the European naivety about China's approach to the EU is over. So they are deeply concerned that China is trying to really divide the EU and deal with countries bilaterally rather than multilateral in an EU framework. And also the forthcoming 16+1 summit in Croatia, where 11 EU countries participate, plus 4 4 candidate countries for EU membership, that is something which worries the EU. They don't want to be broken up. Whether that is an exaggerated worry, that is difficult to say, but it, I think, is up to China to demonstrate that China, as the Chinese Prime Minister said, has no intention to divide the EU. That is not yet fully believed in Brussels, but of course it can still be demonstrated. And here I think the ball is in China's court.
All right, Professor Klaus Larres, thank you so much.